Welcome back! This is MLP Conspiracy, where I am forced to prattle on about some random thing that hasn't got a snowball's chance in a furnace of being real. You know, I was really hoping we weren't going to do any more of these. Anyway, please take everything we say with a grain of salt. This is just a bit of fun, and we don't want to get anyone too worked up. Now, what crazy bit of headcanon does Daga have for me this time?
I've got a theory that it's a demon, a dancing demon. Nah, something isn't right there.
I've got a theory, some kid is dreaming, and we're all stuck inside his wacky Broadway nightmare.
Oh, come on! I don't want to talk about your shipping nonsense. I'm gonna use that... I've already used the Get Out of Conspiracy card last episode. No, please, don't make me talk about this. Alright, fine. I guess this is what we're going to do now. Let's discuss whether or not Spike and Rarity will ever get together. We've known it from the first episode of the show. Spike's got a crush on Rarity, and it's still going strong after all these years. But if we're going to talk about the likelihood of anything coming from it, we don't start with Spike's feelings, or even Rarity's. We need to address that of the show's creators. Way back when, Lauren Faust went on record saying that she didn't want any kind of romance involving the main cast of Friendship is Magic, as she considers it to be a major factor in bringing down thousands of girls' shows. Hasbro's attempts to make Flash Century a thing has certainly added weight to that argument, and for the longest time that was all we had to work with. But recently there's been a shift in this position. Big Mac and Sugar Belle, and now Maud and Mudbriar, are both ships that are rather well received by the fandom, and they aren't just one-shot ideas either. Both pairings have shown up in multiple episodes so far, and Sugar Mac is even a part of the opening now. While neither is quite a main character, Daga has felt for a while that this is Hasbro testing the waters to see if they can get away with something bigger. And with the show ending relatively soon, there's a good chance they'd be willing to try things they'd be too cautious to otherwise. So it's possible, and let me stress only possible, that Hasbro might be open for a bit of romance. But while Spike's crush has laid a ton more groundwork than any other pairing so far, there are a few issues that make this ship harder to pull off. I'm going to address these problems one at a time, so let's just dive headfirst into the hardest one. This is perhaps the most obvious problem. Spike is a baby dragon, and Rarity is a grown pony. Rarity is much too old for him. Right? You know, I was hoping I wouldn't have to do this, but I guess I don't have a choice. Stand back. I am going to deduce the exact ages of every pony right here, right now. Which is a lot easier said than done. The show's staff seems to have gone out of their way to avoid any mention of the girls' ages, save for a single throwaway line of dialogue.
About this party for Gilda, do you really think it's a good idea? I mean...
Don't worry your pretty little head about mean old Gilda. Your Auntie Pinkie Pie's got it all taken care of.
I'm a year older than you.
That's it. That's all the evidence we've ever gotten as to their relative ages. But I'm not going to let something like a lack of evidence stop me. Watch as I take that single line and run with it for all that it's worth. Starting with an episode we will all soon be very familiar with.
Apple Bloom? Hey sis, how'd you get your cutie mark?
I never told you that story?
This episode is important not only because it contains all the main six, but we know for a fact that all the flashbacks are happening at the exact same time. Now on the surface, these scenes could be happening at any point in their lives, but there are a few clues if we look close enough, and the first of which we find is with young Twilight. Twilight's flashback starts with the summer sun celebration. That tells us this takes place during the second half of the summer, perhaps pretty far into it considering how long it probably took her to read all those books. More importantly, the rain boom occurs while Twilight is applying to Celestia's school, in specific Magic Kindergarten.
She won't just send me back a grade. She'll send me back to magic kindergarten.
Now, the general rule is that things in MLP are the same as in the real world unless specifically told otherwise. And considering how much we have seen of the equestrian school system, there is very little reason to think that this is any different. Indeed, we've actually seen Celestia's class, and it does appear to be actual kindergarten, albeit for a private school. So that means that Twilight is around 4 to 5 years old in this flashback, depending on when in the year her birthday is. This gives us our first toehold into determining the rest of the group. Let's spring to Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash. We see them attending summer flight camp, confirming the summer season at least. Most summer camps only allow children around 6 to 7 years old at the youngest, but considering that this is where they learn to fly, quite the valuable skill in a Pegasus community, it's reasonable to assume that they start earlier. So we can make the assumption that most of these foals are around 5 to 6 years old, with a bit more emphasis towards older. Now this is clearly the first time Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash meet, else the bullies would know better. But consider what that means. Why are they only just meeting now? It can't be possible for this to be the start of the camp, because thanks to Twilight's story, we know it's late in the second half of the summer, which is a terrible time for a summer camp to start. More likely this is the end of the summer camp, and the foals are showing off everything they've learned at camp. In addition, now that we've met Dash's enthusiastic parents, it makes sense they bring her to places where they can show her off to other parents. And that a young, competitive Rainbow wouldn't be able to help showing off her skills. Remember, Rainbow Dash claims to have been the first in her class to have gotten a cutie mark.
But Applejack says, hey, who are you gonna listen to? Applejack or the pony who was first in her class to get a cutie mark?
But close attention shows that several of the kids at the camp, including at least one of the bullies, already has their mark. The logical conclusion is that everyone here is older than Rainbow Dash, which gels with how the bullies seem to be already familiar with Fluttershy, but not Rainbow. A conservative guess now puts Fluttershy at around 5 to 6 like the rest of the foals of the camp, and Rainbow a year younger at 4 to 5. Pinkie Pie's turn. At first, there's nothing to work with here, but consider this. Maud is absent from this entire flashback. This is a strange oversight that's probably chalked up to the writers not having thought of her yet, but there is another possibility. After all, it could just as easily been either Marble or Limestone as Pinkie's super serious sister, so there was no reason to create a whole new pony that wasn't even in this flashback. So if that's the case, where is Maud? Well, in a previous video, I speculated that the Pie sisters are sent to live in other towns to receive their educations. This explains why Pinkie was sent to Ponyville, which is quite a long train ride away from her farm, at the young age she appears to be in Cheese Sandwich's flashback. This could explain why Maud is absent in her story. She's left to attend school in another town. And this sheds an interesting new light on all this. It's no secret that Pinkie is extremely attached to her older sister, along with the rest of her family, so her behavior in this flashback always struck us as a little odd. But now imagine that Maud has only just left the farm, and it will be the better part of a year until Pinkie sees her again. Suddenly, her sadness makes a whole lot more sense, doesn't it? Especially if this is the first year Maud is away. Pinkie is feeling lonely without her big sister, and unsure if she can be happy without her. So if Maud is in her first year at school, which makes her around 5, that puts her younger sister in the 4 to 5 area. Rarity's story puts her taking part in a play, and the presence of the schoolhouse in the background suggests that this is a school function. As we know, this happens during the summer, but since it occurs at the end of summer, this could have been a project her class has been working on over the vacation. Remember, Rarity was in charge of the costumes, which implies some pony else was in charge of the set, and the script, and so forth. A big project like that lends credence to the idea that they've been doing this planned project together for a while, so it's likely this group has already got a year of school under their belts. Let's slide Rarity into the 5 to 6 group. Applejack is a bit of a pickle. You see, as far as I can tell, there's no clues at all. At first I was under the impression that her parents were already, among the stars, and that was why she was looking for more family figures. But that puts Apple Bloom in an awkward position, or at least makes her far older than the evidence would suggest. Fortunately, I don't really need to figure out Applejack's age for this particular argument, but for completion's sake I peg her at 5 to 6. There are 3 reasons. Number 1, the rest of the girls usually treat her as an older sister, so it makes sense for her to be older than some of them. Secondly, she walks unaccompanied all the way to another city. Equestria is a dangerous place. The older she is when she makes this trip, the more I believe it. And thirdly, look at the spread we have so far. Another 5 to 6-year-old gives us 3 and 3, which makes my inner OCD nice and happy. So now we've got a pretty fine age spread out here, but my job is only half done. Time to age them up to the current timeline. Now the show's pretty loose when it comes to when episodes happen in relation to each other. We only need to look back at Winter Wrap-Up taking place right before Fall Weather Friends to know that. However, we can generally accept that the seasons themselves happen in order. Major events like Twilight becoming an alicorn, the reforming of Discord, the Crusaders getting their cutie marks, the addition of Starlight Glimmer to the cast, things like these are definite landmarks we can depend on. Next, consider that we have 3 Hearthswarming Eve episodes so far. In the first one, Twilight is a unicorn. In the second, Twilight is an alicorn, and Applejack and Pinkie are spending the holidays at Pinkie's farm. And in the third, Applejack and Pinkie are back in Ponyville, and Starlight is present. This means that these 3 episodes refer to 3 different Hearthswarmings, meaning that at least 3 years have passed. With this in mind, we can make the assumption that each season roughly covers about 6 months of time. It is mentioned at the start of Season 4 that this is the first Summer Sun celebration that Luna's attending, which means that Seasons 1 through 3 take place in only 1 year. But considering Season 3 is a short season, this can still work out. Let us assume that from the start of the show to the present, it's been roughly 3.5 years. This is important, but we'll be back to it in a minute. Now, Twilight starts the series in her home, and we never see her return to school at any point. There is a possibility that the friendship reports she was sending Celestia were for education, but considering we never see Twilight's graduation ceremony, we can probably safely assume she's not in school anymore. However, Moon Dancer is. We've seen her attending lectures and studying, so she at least is still in classes. Remember, they were in kindergarten together, and should be the same age. Assuming that Twilight Sparkle isn't a dropout, the most logical assumption here is that Twilight finished high school and decided not to keep studying, while Moon Dancer continued into college. While we don't know how long ago high school was for them, the episodes Moon does appear in are in Season 5, so it has been at least 2 years. This gives us a 6-year period this could possibly take place in, depending on whether Moon Dancer is going for a 4 or an 8-year degree. Back to Fluttershy and Pinkie. Remember how they're only 1 year apart? Well, now consider that Fluttershy has a younger brother, Zephyr Breeze, and Pinkie has an older sister, Maud. Zephyr graduates in Season 6, and Maud gets her diploma in Season 7. See the problem yet? If the timescale I propose is correct, that means these events occur no more than 1 year apart from each other, at most. Now, there is no way to make the math work out that Zephyr and Maud are the same age. So how is it possible they are graduating in the same year? There are only 2 possibilities. The first is that there is a 4-year gap in their ages, and Maud is getting an 8-year degree, while Zephyr is only getting a 4-year one. This certainly connects with the pun rock turret.
Earning a doctorate in rock studies from the Equestrian Institute of Rockology is no easy feat.
However, since Zephyr graduates a season earlier, this makes the minimum differences in their ages 5 years, closing in on 6. And while that still fits with the range we're working with, it strains it to the very edge of probability and, more importantly, there's no other evidence to support it. The second possibility is that Zephyr isn't going to a general college, but a specialist one. Normal hairdresser college programs only need 2 to 3 years to get your degree, and considering Zephyr's lazy personality, 3 years seems more likely. So if he's getting a 3-year degree, and Maud is 1 year older than him, going for a 4-year degree, that allows them to graduate perfectly in the time frame of the show. More importantly, it gives us firm ages for us to work with. If Maud is getting a 4-year degree in Season 7, then she is either 22 or 23 years old. This means her 1 year younger sister is 21 to 22 or so. Subtract about 3 years to bring us back to Season 1, and here are every pony's ages at the start of the show. Now, look at Twilight. 18 to 19. Which is the exact age when she'd graduate from high school and her and Moondancer's paths in life split. When taken separately, all these points are too small to stand on their own. But together, they surprisingly manage to support each other. There's more evidence I could bring up, but that's not really the purpose of this video, and we've already spent far too long on this as is. Suffice to say that these ages are pretty solid, and if we add 3 years, these are the ages of the main 6 in the show right now. Now, what does all this have to do with Spike and Rarity, you ask? Well, there was one other thing we learned from the Cutie Mark Chronicles. The exact moment Spike hatches from his egg. During this flashback, Spike is age 0, so he is always exactly 4.5 years younger than Twilight. This means that at the start of the show, he's roughly 14 years old, and currently, he'd be 17 going on 18. That's right, all you perverts out there. All your fanfics about Spike coming of legal age are literally right about to happen. And even if I'm completely wrong about their actual ages, this age gap is completely unarguable. Spike is no more than 5 or 6 years younger than Rarity, and while that puts a relationship between them a little on the inappropriate side, it's not nearly as much as you'd think. And an age difference this small is going to matter less and less the older these two get. But that does lead into the second problem with these two as a couple. Alright, I've kind of been digging this hole with all my work from the last part. Despite Spike's actual age, I really can't deny that he's very specifically called a baby dragon.
You've been up all night, Spike. You are a baby dragon after all.
Both Twilight and the Teen Dragons have beat Spike's youth into our heads over and over. The fact that he's only just recently gone through, well, there's no really better word for it, dragon puberty, only seems to confirm this. While he may be nearly an adult by pony standards, physically he's still only a child. And to that I say bull spit. We had an entire episode where Spike decided that being a pony meant more to him than being a dragon. So him deciding to wait for some arbitrary dragon adulthood is not even worth considering. And as for the body issue, let's talk about what actually constitutes an adult dragon. Right off the bat, we need to remember that dragon bodies are morphic.
The last time I grew up, I turned into a giant greedy monster.
Greed-induced bigness. That's totally different.
A dragon's state of mind causes their body to age, not just grow bigger. Spike was very specifically getting older.
Ooh, he is starting to mature. Of this fact, I am quite sure.
Mature? So he's just growing up?
This brings up the very real possibility we haven't actually seen very many adult dragons. Consider the very first dragon we meet. He spends nearly the whole episode napping, doesn't know he shouldn't be in the Ponylands, can't seem to produce fire like Spike, just smoke, and when scolded, he cries like a baby. Before learning that his wings probably means he's gone through the dragon molt, I was willing to lay down money that this dragon was even younger than Spike. In fact, this seems like a trend we can apply to most of the adult dragons we've seen. Most of them are overly aggressive beasts, when they aren't just lying around like cats. Very few of these dragons exhibit all that much in the way of observable higher intelligence. Save for the teenage dragons. Big Green spoke, and Ember's dad did, but that's it. And consider this, it wasn't any of the adult dragons who went on the quest to become the Dragon Lord. That scepter had the power to command any dragon to do its owner's bidding. Plus it's got a big honkin' jewel on the end of it. Are you seriously going to tell me that none of those big, powerful, greedy monsters had any interest in becoming Dragon Lord? But no, only the smaller dragons were offered the opportunity. My point is that a dragon being mature doesn't seem to have any correlation with a dragon's age. There seems to be an inverse relationship between a dragon's size and their intelligence. And since most dragons' socializing seems to happen when they're smaller, it stands to reason that dragons get into relationships when they're younger to begin with. Clearly, the big adult dragons are loners who rarely gather, so why would they have families? Dragon relationships probably happen around Garble's age group, when dragons are still being civil with each other. And this age bracket can't be too far off if Spike was considered a possible Dragon Lord candidate. Kinda like how a 13-year-old and a 19-year-old are both considered teens, even though they are clearly very different. I hold that a dragon's maturity has nothing to do with the size of their bodies. Much like ponies, their growth doesn't really correspond to the way humans grow. Maybe I'm stretching here, but we simply haven't been shown anything to tell us different. What I'm trying to say is that if Spike wanted to get into a relationship, I don't think it would matter if he were physically old enough. That's just not how dragons in MLP work. And if I'm wrong, hey, there's always adoption. But speaking of that, so far, all the problems have been focused on whether it's possible for the pairing to work, and I think I've done justice to my side of it. But is it likely to work in concept? After all, we've never seen a pony be interested in anyone other than another pony. So the next question is... And oh boy, have I been dreading this one. You see, of the two questions so far, Daga's been on his best behavior. The first one involved math and educated guesses, and the second was mostly just opinion. All of this is relatively tame compared to the last few videos he's made, but this one... he's saved all his crazy for this part, folks. You see, Daga believes it's not only possible for a dragon and a pony to have a relationship, he's convinced there's already been such a pairing. But before we reveal who, I need to explain a little bit about pony genetics. See, thanks to a very unexpected source, we know a little bit about how pony families work.
Now, how in thunderation is one of them twins a Pegasus and the other one a unicorn?
Easy. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was a unicorn, and Cupcake's great-aunt, second cousin twice removed, was a Pegasus. That makes sense, right?
This actually tells us a number of things about how biology works in this universe. The biggest thing is that they are officially referred to as a unicorn and a Pegasus. Pumpkin Cake isn't referred to as part unicorn, and Pound isn't called part Pegasus. They just are a unicorn and a Pegasus. And considering how far back Mr. Cake had to go to find appropriate ancestors, that means that the rest of their family tree has to be all Earth ponies. With all that, the fact that they aren't called part Earth pony can only mean one thing. You can only be a unicorn, Pegasus, or Earth pony. There are no hybrids in MLP. This is confirmed by what Celestia says when Flurryheart is born.
But I thought alicorn wings had to be earned by accomplishing some great princess-worthy deed.
Yeah, how can you just be born with them?
The birth of an alicorn is something Equestria has never seen.
It is beyond even our understanding.
When a unicorn and a Pegasus have a child, the result is not an alicorn. It was possible for Flurry to be an alicorn because her mother is an alicorn, which incidentally implies that Celestia and Luna have never tried to have kids before. But anyway, there's no other way to be born one.
Now, Cousin Strudel, she used to get him too. Now, of course, she was a champion fritters for...
Okay, I don't know what he is, and it makes me angry, but my logic still holds up. Now, this doesn't mean that a pony can't have traits to show their mixed ancestry. Take Ponyville, which started as an Earth pony settlement, but is now one of the only places we've seen that has a mixed community. Nearly every unicorn in Ponyville has a rounded horn, whereas ponies from a unicorn-centric city like Canterlot tend to have pointed horns. And it has not escaped our notice that the only town where Pegasi live with other races has produced not one, but 2 Pegasi with stunted wings. All of this strongly suggests that being a unicorn or Pegasus is based on genes. Like eye color or freckles, they can be either dominant or recessive. And considering the sheer number of Earth ponies in the Cake family, it's likely that Earth pony genes are the dominant ones. Look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this, but I do know that recessive genes can skip entire generations before randomly showing up in a child, and that is exactly what Mr. Cake is describing. So to bring all this back to our main topic, were a dragon and a pony to have a child, the kid would almost certainly not be a dragon-pony hybrid. Their hypothetical kid would have to be either a dragon or a pony. Which means we're looking for either a dragon with pony traits or a pony with dragon features, preferably an Earth pony. Finding such a character would prove that a dragon-pony pairing is possible, and as they say in law school, providing precedent is the next best thing to providing proof. Too bad no pony fits the bill, right? Well, as I said before, Daga's found a pony with dragon traits. Are you ready for this? That pony is... Maud Pie. Wait, don't leave! You've come this far, at least listen to his reasoning. Maud has shown several dragon-like qualities. Take, for example, her incredible super strength. That boulder she reduced to rubble in her first appearance is a feat no pony has matched. In fact, there's only 3 ponies who have ever done something similar. The first is Rockhoof, when he dug that enormous trench in a matter of seconds. But he could only do that after he'd been empowered with his magic shovel, so his strength isn't really his own. The second pony is Applejack, who tosses this giant boulder like it's nothing. This is certainly similar to the rock Maud threw over the horizon. While it doesn't come up very often, we do need to remember that by this point, Applejack has fused with her element. Even though we haven't seen this transformation since, there really is no telling what permanent changes this did to Applejack's body. It is worth noting that she didn't show anything like this level of strength before Season 4. Rainbow Dash was able to outmuscle her in Fall Weather Friends, for example, and Rainbow couldn't throw a boulder nearly as far. It's definitely possible that she's only this strong in later seasons because she's magically enhanced just like Rockhoof. And the third pony? Why, that would be Pinkie Pie, when she also demolished a rock with her bare hooves. This happened in an alternate universe, so she doesn't have the same excuse of being empowered by the elements of harmony that Applejack does. And if Maud is descended from a dragon, of course her sister would have the same genes. But super strength doesn't really say dragon, now does it? After all, there are numerous creatures that are strong in MLP, even if this has anything to do with genetics. You'd need something that's uniquely dragon-like to be considered proof. How about eating gems? And I'm not talking about rock candy, which is very specifically rocks which are edible. I mean that time when she's first introduced, where she picks up one of Rarity's gemstones and bites into it like an apple. If there's one thing we know about dragons in MLP, it's that they eat gems. Now, we'd normally just chalk this up to a comedic sight gag. She is related to Pinky, after all. But there is another pony who ate a rock just like this. When the pie and apple families are sitting down for rock soup, look close at Pinky's father in the background. Right here, right here. He bites into the rock in the exact way Maud did. And once again, he'd have the same genes that Maud has. Now, pardon me for a while as I indulge in some hypothetical musing. Let's imagine that at some point in the past, a pony and a dragon fell in love with each other. What would happen with this couple? Well, we know that ponies are rather xenophobic and are especially closed-minded where dragons are concerned.
Nothing. Nothing in this one either.
Nothing at all about dragons? This is getting ridiculous!
I know. It's hard to believe, but ponies know next to nothing about dragons. Apparently they're too rare and too scary to try to talk to or study.
From what we've seen, dragons are not much better. Both races are changing, but that's only a recent thing. In the past, our couple would have needed to hide their relationship. Most likely they'd build their home in an abandoned place. Somewhere barren that a pony wouldn't grow crops in, or not hilly enough for dragons to wander to. However, this barren land would need to be rich in gems, which the dragon would need to eat. The pony could sell some of these excess gems, which would be a good cover story for why they choose to live in such a boring place. The couple would have to keep away from other ponies, lest their secret get revealed, and that would result in some cultural quirks remaining unchanged as the years go by. You know, things like accents, for example. Inevitably, the dragon would grow as large as the rest of its kind, so they'd have to dig tunnels beneath their home for the dragon to hide in when the rare visitor does come. Such tunnels, were they to be hypothetically filled to the brim with enormous gemstones, might imply that the gem farmers are extremely wealthy. But if their home were filled with simple furnishings, one could argue it's proof that the gems they mine are going somewhere other than an open market. And let us not forget that ponies love to build statues to their ancestors, especially those who are progenitors of a family line. But a pony and a dragon can't have a giant statue of the two of them without revealing the secret they're trying to keep. But say that the couple had a child, and that their offspring just happened to be born from an egg, the way dragons are born. A giant rock that looks like an egg wouldn't mean anything to a casual visitor who wasn't in the know. But, like I said, that is all hypothetical. I mean, what are the odds there's an old farm in the middle of a barren flat wasteland where gemstones are mined both in small quantities above ground and in massive quantities in secret caves, whose inhabitants are secular isolationists with archaic ways of speaking, who honor a giant statue that vaguely resembles an egg and who sometimes display dragon-like qualities? I mean, that would be just too much of a coincidence, don't you think? Now, Daga's not insane enough to claim that this was all planned, but it would take no effort at all to make this canon. You just need Maud to mention in passing she's related to a dragon, or for their father to tell them it's time to reveal the family secret. It doesn't even have to take up an entire episode, just a little aside, and we've heard a lot crazier things from the Pye sisters than this. So now, we're back to the original question. If Spike is old enough for a relationship, and this wouldn't be the first time such a relationship has happened, then does he have a shot? Spike's affection is clear on the subject, and out of all the main six, Rarity is the one whose preferences we can be absolutely certain about. Might this actually happen? It's hard to say. Normally I'd say that it would be too much of a change to the dynamic of the show, and indeed, any romance involving the main cast would be. But with the end of the generation looming on the horizon, all bets are off. If there's one thing we know about the writers, it's that they love this show. The 100th episode would never have happened the way it did if they didn't care deeply about these characters. With an entire season to plan the perfect way to wrap things up, they're definitely going to give our girls the send-off they deserve. There is going to be a final episode, showing just how far they have come. Hey, there's probably going to be several. So what do you think the last Spike episode is going to be about? If I were to make a guess, remember that age chart I made earlier? Season 9 would see Spike turning 18, especially if another Summer Sun celebration happens around the final episode, which would be an appropriate note to end the show on. I imagine an episode focusing around Spike's birthday, especially if it's a birthday as important as this one. Think about it. What better way to close off Spike's story? He officially graduates from being a baby dragon, which has been a theme we're slowly building around right now in Season 8. And what would happen in this hypothetical episode? Well, the stuff you'd usually expect: Spike worrying about the future, Twilight coming to terms with Spike growing up, every pony congratulating him on how he's grown, stuff like that. And while it wouldn't need to be the focus of the episode, all of that love and praise would be just the confidence boost Spike needs to finally confess his crush. After 9 long seasons, it would be the perfect way to bring Spike's story full circle. And Rarity's answer? I'll be honest, while I can definitely see the confession happening so clearly I could put money on it, I think it might be a little too much if his love were accepted just like that. But after everything I've proven today, I'm no longer convinced her answer is going to be a hard no. Rarity's opinion of Spike has definitely shifted to something stronger over the years. In an almost too subtle to notice shift, she's gone from treating him like an intern or a baby to showing deep concern and affection for him, even over her own safety. Maybe she won't straight up say yes, but she might say they should wait a few years, or divert the question in a way that would leave it open to our interpretation. All I can say for sure is that Spike's odds are a lot better than any pony believes. I am exhausted, so that's going to have to be enough for today. I hope at least something I've said has been worth sitting through all this nonsense for. On the next MLP conspiracy, I'll reveal that my cutie mark is fake. Wait, that isn't true at all. Don't pay attention to that. See you next time.
Maybe midgets.